Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
Hello and welcome to the Healers Café. And today I have with me Sue Dumais, and she's a global impact visionary leader, and she's answering the call to wake up the world. She's a best-selling author, international speaker, gifted intuitive healer, ordained minister, and inspiration for the Heart Yes movement. With 6 published books under her belt, Sue's heart work is designed to change minds, open hearts, uplift humanity, and unify us in love for each other and our planet. And my goodness, this is definitely the time to hear from you, because our planet is in dire need of inspiration and hope and all of that. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So Sue, well, we're definitely going to go into how you do your work and what is it you do. But I want to ask you first, what brought you into this field and this work that you do?
I feel like my own personal healing journey has really always kind of created the path for me for my work. I've never really had like a separate job and healing. They've always intertwined or overlapped. And there's times where maybe I kind of had more of a traditional job, but I've always had more of a level of career that allowed me to do my own healing as well. So it's been something that just kind of organically has evolved over the years. But it's really important to me because I feel like my purpose here on earth is actually to inspire and empower healing in self and others. So it's always been a very big part of who I am here.
So, and was there something though in your own life that like it's always been like, what's the right word in English with, it's like it grows on each other as you evolve, things evolve, but you've always done a work of connection and passion to your own purpose and your own life, it sounds like, right? There's never been like a
Yeah.
complete
Well,
break.
you know what? No, well, in some ways, the first part of my life, I was very much, I felt that calling to heal the world, to wake up the world, to help people. I always had that like helper in me. It was innate in me. And I was really drawn to animals because animals were really easy to connect with more than humans.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was always triggered by humans because as an empath, I could feel their physical pain. I could feel their emotional pain in my body as if it was my own. So it was actually easier to be around animals than it was to be around humans when I was growing up. So I did start a career in animal health as an animal health technician. And that work was really easy for me to connect to the animals and in the same way feel more connected to my sense of self. But in that first part of my life, I was confused by my intuitive gift. I was bombarded by information from other people, their pain, their suffering, their trauma, all of it. It was like I lived in a world of pain, my own internal pain, and I've carried like everybody else's pain as well. And I was responsible for taking that on. But part of it is I just didn't understand my gift. The way the intuitive messages would come to me was quite confusing. So the first half of my life, I actually denied my gift. I thought it was a curse. I thought I was being punished. And I tried to numb it out. I did everything I could. Drugs, alcohol, anorexia, you name it. I was struggling and I had a really traumatic first part of my life. My wake up call came in around the time of my anorexia, when my anorexia was at its worst. And my drinking was at its worst as well. And I wrote a poem one night when I was drunk. And I woke up in the morning, kind of opening my eyes going, I can't believe I'm still alive feeling. And then I remembered writing a poem. And I went to the garbage because I had crumpled it up and threw it out. And I opened up the poem and I read it. And it was in that moment that I really realized that if I kept going on the path I was going, I wouldn't be in this world very long. And I knew in that moment that I needed to get help. And that's where everything shifted. And that really catapulted me onto this path of personal growth and self-discovery and healing.
Interesting. And so what how did you, what is intuition to you? Like how now you realize it's a gift, but what is that in your words? Because it's funny, this morning I had a discussion with somebody else saying had very strong opinions about what intuition is, and so it started raising questions on the subject. So it's actually perfect timing, as life always is, that you're here, and that's your specialty. So tell us what intuition is. And this audience is both medically trained, all kinds of practitioners, as well as the public who's just interested. So go as in depth as you want. Feel free.
Yeah. Well, for me, I feel like intuition, you can't just say, okay, intuition is this, period. So intuition is for me an exploration of really a deep connection to an inner knowing. And that inner knowing goes beyond the physical limitations or the ideas or programming that we have in our minds. So sometimes when we get these intuitive hits or this intuitive knowing or inner knowing, it can come in a variety of different ways. Some people get messages, some people hear a voice in their head, some people just feel a sense of knowing, some people have a physical sense of it, or gut instinct. You can call it so many things. And I believe that what is really important to discern is, what is it for me? What is it for you? How does it show up in your world? How does it show up for you? And that's really what we're wanting to tap into and help people with, because the more we can align with that intuition, the more we can actually serve. So another way to look at it is, I always see that intuition is the bridge. And I use the heart. My business is heart-led living. So I use the heart as that bridge for our intuition. And I talk about how the heart or our intuition is a bridge between our divinity and our humanness. And so what we're tapping into is more of a global perspective, of a global knowing, or a grand understanding of what's going on in the world, which then sends us messages to our human self to be able to interpret and fulfill whatever we're meant to fulfill in this life. So intuition creates this bridge between our divinity and our humanness.
Okay, so, and do you make a distinction between intuition and instinct?
Instincts can be intuition and intuition can be instincts, and then they can be separate as well. So we can have these human kind of instinctual reactions or responses in our body, or we can have instincts based on our human understanding or our human programming. And then we can have more intuitive hits, which are not necessarily limited by our own programming, our own beliefs and thoughts. So yes and no, and both.
Okay, but what we say to you, what is the difference between an instinct and intuition?
I feel like instinct is more limited by our humanness. It's more dictated by our humanness. Our human body, our human body, our human ideas, our brain, our programming, our fear, our history, our past, our memories. Whereas intuition can go beyond all of those things. And
so where is that? I'm playing the devil's advocate.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
yeah. It's a subject I'm obviously very interested in anyways. But okay, so just to chime in here. So for me, instinct is what we are brought up with. It's part of our survival mechanism. It's part of what is created in response to our first 7 years of life. So to me, instinct is there to protect us. Hence, it's fear-based. So that's how I've always seen it. Like, it can save your life for sure, but it's not, it's different to me, very much so, than intuition. So that's how I differentiate the almost the physiology in the body. It actually comes from a different place.
Yeah. And you can even go, you can even talk about, that's what I talk about, like in our humanness, instinct is connected to our humanness, right? In our humanness, in our human experiences, we have our past, but we also have past life influence as well. So I've worked with a lot of people where their past life is actually creating that instinctual reaction in the present moment as well. So I agree with what you're saying. Yeah.
So do you because you work with people and you have groups and all that, how do you get people to connect to their intuition? What is there a methodology that you have found where, because I know when, with my own patients, the question often is like, how do I know if that's the voice of intuition? That's one of the most commonly, I've got one answer for that, but I'm always looking for insight. So what do you tell people?
Yeah, I think for me, getting people in touch with their intuition is more of a process of unwinding, undoing, unschooling, unprogramming, unlearning, and removing all the blocks that are interfering with that clear intuitive channel. So we're born intuitive. We are programmed to be less intuitive, right? So it's about removing all the programming and in a process of remembering our intuition, remembering how we feel it and know it and sense it. Now, the discernment, that's a whole practice in itself, is discerning. How do I know it's head versus heart? How do I know that that voice I hear is actually my heart's voice versus my head's voice, or my ego, my fear speaking to me? And that the best advice I give people is to get out of thinking about what it is and more about feeling into it. So when you hear something or when you sense something, tap into the feeling behind the intuition or the feeling behind that insight. And that's where the divine discernment, that subtle discernment comes in, because what we're tapping into is the emotions and the energy behind it, which gives you more clarity. It gives you more certainty that, yeah, this is alignment, and no, this is fear disguised as guidance, which the ego loves to do. It's very clever. It loves to evolve and become this our greatest cheerleader, or can hijack our spiritual language and all those kinds of things. So the divine discernment for me really comes into the feeling. And if you can feel the energy behind it, then you're more likely to get more of a clarity around where it's coming from.
Okay, so let me give you a hypothetical case, because now they're pretty constant with so many people in fear and so many people having greater anxiety, getting more depressed, partially because of the economy, what's happening in this world, and the impact that the isolation has for many people. So there's a lot going on, and there's been a lot of things that happen now are also breaking up, families, breaking up couples, breaking up, which is a time of reconsideration and reawakening. There's always a way to, at least I find that the mind can always find a way to say, well, it's perfect timing. We're just now at the point where this is emerging. So it's time to look at these things. But I have one case that comes to mind that I was trying to explain what intuition is and how to feel into it. And I'm just so curious because it's so fresh. So this person, whom I will not name and just make it anybody, has a huge decision to make and wants to be led by the right feeling. And so he knows or believes, this is the belief, that he's unhappy currently, and he knows that his wife is doing everything in her capacity to improve her mental state, her emotional state, but he is absolutely miserable in the situation because her panic-stricken fear mode is starting to impact him very strongly. And yet at the same time, I said, well, how are you really feeling? And he said, well, if I were to feel like, he said, I feel like the relationship is over. That was the feeling he had. And it's been over for a while, in his heart, but he's full of love and recognition of her being available to him for years. So they've been together for a long time. It's like the typical sort of Alzheimer's situation or anything like that, where it's like there's a major shift that makes the present moment in a repeated way very unhappy. And so he can't go on like this, but doesn't know how to choose because neither options feel right. Staying.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's not always a feeling of rightness. It's not always a feeling of good. It can show up as like, okay, my heart is leading me to something and my mind is resisting it. Mm-hmm. So he has a knowing in his heart that the relationship is over, but he doesn't want to take those steps, or he's not willing to take those steps, or something in his mind is in conflict with that. So then he's in resistance, right? So the knowing is there. It sounds like, by the way.
Well, but here's the other part is, given the history, by making that decision, there's a very high chance that it would end up in suicide or some sort of something that he would feel responsible for.
Right.
So that's part of his knowing too.
Yeah, I understand. And I've had those experiences where I had to make that hard choice to follow my heart, even when I knew it was going to create chaos for another person. Because when we do follow our heart, when we do follow and trust our intuition, it's operating on everyone's behalf, including the individual that we may hurt by that decision, right? Mm-hmm. So it's when we follow our intuition, what we're really doing is making a choice for love. Mm-hmm. And the choice for love sometimes doesn't look kind. It sometimes isn't received well, but it doesn't mean we stay out of fear, right? Mm-hmm. However, we get to choose. As humans, we get to choose. Mm-hmm. So he may have that knowing that the relationship is over, but he's not willing to choose as a human being to leave. That's okay too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's okay too, right? But having the ability to discern, okay, I know in my heart the relationship is over. That's one piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. Then the next question is it guided for me to leave right now? Is it guided for me to leave this relationship? Is that what my intuition is saying? Because it's all about timing as well, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the questions we ask will lead us to the guidance in the moment. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we still have to meet ourselves in our human emotions and say, you know what? I know in my heart I'm meant to leave. I just can't bring myself to do that. Mm-hmm. And I'm too afraid. And that's okay. Totally okay. But having the awareness that that's the choice you're making is empowering, right?
Exactly. It brings you back to peace. Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a lot in that to kind of play with, but it really depends on the quality of the question determines the answer we get as well. So we have to be kind of open and curious, because our intuition is what I see. It's a connection to our inner spirit or divine spirit, right? Guiding us. And when we ask a question, okay, spirit, would you have me do A or B?
Hi, it's Dr. Manon, and I just wanted to take a moment, commercial break, to ask you to subscribe to my podcast and kindly leave a comment if you're enjoying this. And also, just to let you know, I have tips for people in health looking for solutions to just a variety of issues. It's more like an attitude of health, and they're entertaining short videos, and that's, you can find those under drmanonbolliger.com/tip. The link is here, and I look forward to hearing from you.
And Spirit's like, well, if you're only giving me those two options, then A is your best choice in this moment. Whereas if we say, what would you have me do? What would you have me do? An open question, then Spirit's like, C, you're going to go down this path. You're going to do it this way. You're going to follow these steps. And that's going to take care of other people a little bit better if we actually really are willing to follow those breadcrumbs without having our human agenda or our human preferences get in the way. So it's a real fine dance. And I love that we're having this conversation, because we're kind of, I'm talking about it in a different way with you. It's just kind of fun. So it feels good.
Yeah, well, I just thought it was very practical, honest positioning. And like for me, it's like my feeling is that when I know it's my intuitive voice, when I can breathe differently, or I have a sense that, that I'm at peace. Doesn't mean it'll be easy, or doesn't mean like all of that, but it's like, okay, that's the next step, so
you connect to that inner knowing, so that brings you that deep peace, because it's like there's a developing of trust there, right?
Yeah. And then you're willing to take the consequences because you're at peace with that knowing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's it's knowing how to know that you're in the knowing. I think that's it.
And making sure that knowing isn't hijacked by the ego, which is fear disguised as knowing, right? So that's that divine discernment. Yeah. It's a practice. I find it's a practice, like anything, practicing, like, exercising a muscle, exercising your intuition is a practice. And the more and more we do it, the more and more we get more confident, the more and more clear we get. It's like, okay, this is what it feels like. This is what intuition feels like. And then we can, develop it from there. Really sink into that remembrance of it, because it is really a remembering.
So next question I have for you. What advice do you have, or for what people are experiencing now? I mean, there's so many different things, but I think we would just
overall, the challenges that people are facing. There's a lot of different challenges people are facing. And if we face those challenges from a perspective of understanding that if it's on your path, it's purposeful. We don't always understand the purpose. We don't always see the reason for it. But knowing that if it's on your path, it must be purposeful, and it's for your healing. So I always look at life as a classroom for our healing and awakening. And the more we can approach life that way, then the more we can find meaning along the path, and the more we can find peace in finding meaning. Now, the key is, how do we find peace without always having an understanding of the meaning? And that's where I practice present moment hindsight. So instead of waiting for hindsight, looking back, going, okay, now it all makes sense in my life, why I quit that job, or why I was fired, or why whatever, we can look back in hindsight. But when you practice present moment hindsight, it opens up space in the mind to connect to meaning or purpose in the moment as things are unfolding. So for me, in those moments where I'm feeling really challenged by what's going on and what I'm witnessing in the world today, especially the separation and the battlefield and the fighting and the violence and this dividedness, division, right? When I see that, I was really struggling with it. So I forgive it all over. And I say, okay, Spirit, hold this for me, because the vision I'm holding is painful. Show me another way to see this situation. Show me another way to look at all of this. Show me a more loving, compassionate perspective so that I don't have this like angst that I'm carrying. And then I start to get these global visions, like these visions of these pockets of separation are happening. This division is happening, but there's these pockets of unification happening at the same time. And as these groups come together and unify, other groups are triggered. So I started to see this a broader, more global kind of understanding. Okay, this is what's happening on a grander scale, and that really helped me. So for me, it's forgiveness, forgiving over the perspective I'm currently holding, honoring my humanness and the challenges that I'm feeling at the same time. So honoring my own emotions, and then asking for another perspective, or tuning into that present moment hindsight so that I can find meaning and then return to peace. That's my process a lot of times around this.
Yeah, no, interesting. You mentioned the 10 stages of evolution of the ego,
Yes.
right? So can you share a little bit what that is, or is this too long a discussion? You might have to do
It's a
Cole's
whole interview in itself, right?
Feel free just to
yeah. So the evolution of the ego is one of my books, and I talk about the 10 stages of evolution. There's 11 now since I wrote the book. I'm like, add another one, right? There's probably more that are going to keep coming. So basically, the way I look at the ego is an overprotective helicopter parent that will stop at nothing to keep you safe, protected, and playing small. And what happens is it takes its job very seriously. And the more we evolve, the more we wake up, the more we start to take risks and really put ourselves out there, shine our light, the more protective the ego becomes. And the more we become aware of how the ego's kind of embedding fear to keep us playing small, the more it needs to evolve, because those things that it's doing to try and keep us safe is no longer working. So it has to evolve. So it evolves. I've talked about the temper tantrum ego. That's one stage. It goes into these temper tantrums and tries to have a hissy fit to make us believe it and buy into the fear. And when that doesn't work, it might become the cheerleader. The cheerleader ego is someone that it's a part of our ego that actually becomes this voice of encouragement. You're doing great. You don't need to do more than you're doing. That's enough. It's like you've done it. You can stop now. Don't go that way. Come this way. This is a safer path. So it becomes this almost disguised as loving kindness and guidance. So, and then there's the spiritual ego, and there's a whole bunch of them. But I find that when we understand how clever and cunning the ego can be, because it's really trying to protect us, when we have that awareness of the stages of what it possibly can use against us to keep us in fear, then we can actually meet it there and shift or move ourselves out of it. Or even with the awareness, we can just acknowledge, oh, I see you. I'm good. I'm not going to let fear stop me here. Thank you for showing up, but I'm going to choose to do this anyways, even though I have fear. So it's been an interesting process, and I've been studying the ego for a long time. So it's been fun to kind of watch it evolve over the years for me personally, but then also watch it evolve now, seeing those stages more clearly for myself, watching those stages and watching my clients go through them. Quite fascinating.
So what's the 11th?
Oh, the 11th one. Well, I call it the super ego. So I've discovered, okay, so there's the spiritual ego, which is when ego hijacks our spirituality. And there's a real inferior, superior element to it. I often describe it as kind of like a peacock spreading out its feathers, kind of showing off, like, here I am. So we can either expand thinking we're better than somebody, or we can contract thinking we're less than somebody. That's the spiritual ego.
Okay.
Now, the spiritual ego is part of us individually. Now, the super ego is the collective ego, or the collective fear of everyone, everywhere, all together, all at once. And it's a force to be reckoned with. It's like when I first discovered my super ego, it was actually when I was launching my book, The Evolution of the Ego, the day of the launch. super ego showed up big time in the mirror, basically looking back at me, and was like, how dare you put this out in the world? And it was this like force bigger than any energy of fear I've ever met. But it was like the collective fear of humanity all into one big ego. It was quite interesting to face that one down.
Wow, yeah. And you still went through.
Yeah.
At least you recognized it.
And I come out the other side.
So that was the 10th. Or that was
the 11th. Spiritual
that's
ego, or dissolved ego is actually the 10th. They're not in any particular
yeah,
order.
I get it. Just
the super ego was the one that I just discovered.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, but that because you've had several books out now, so
yes,
it finally reared its face.
Yeah, exactly. How dare you expose me? I'm like, sorry, it's time. Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna wrap up, but I have one more question for you. Actually, no, you know what? Instead of a question, is there something you specifically wanted to share and you can take a few minutes. We don't, but something that feels right to you to share.
I believe right now, it's interesting, as much as we can look around and see all the chaos and the battleground and the fights and the contrast and the division. I just want people to know that from my perspective, I did lose a little bit of hope for humanity there for a while. I was like, I don't know if we're going to pull ourselves out of this one. Like, we're really going down this wormhole. And I felt a shift. And this shift that happened, it was just in the last couple months, really created a renewed hope for humanity, a renewed energy and possibility for transformation and for shifts to happen that are actually going to serve all of us. And I feel actually really quite excited. And as much as people come to me and they're like, but there's this and there's this, and I'm like, the masks and that, and I'm like, you can focus on all those things individually, but I keep being pointed back to like the grand plan, like what's really happening. And I'm actually quite excited for humanity right now, the shifts that are happening. So if you can't find your own glimmer of hope, or you can't find that faith for humanity within your own heart and mind right now, you can borrow mine, because right now it's quite solid.
Okay, I have time for one more question. I'm going to ask that question. So part of my belief is that healing is bringing things to consciousness, and I'm in the process of questioning that belief, whether of course there's examples of it, but is it a principle? Is it true that healing brings things to consciousness?
It's an interesting way to speak about it. And depending on the individual you're talking to, some people will need to hear it that way. And some people will need to hear it in a different way. So I just want to, I always talk about there's no right or wrong. There's no, there's just, what does that person need to hear right now? And if that's what they need to hear, then that helps them. Then that's purposeful. Right. So I love that you're questioning it, because I feel like there's a little bit of your own personal kind of evolution happening at your own understanding of it.
Yeah, people are saying, oh, there's so much more consciousness happening now, right? In those who are seeing that this whatever's happening is happening for a reason, and therefore they say people are waking up or starting to question, and et cetera, et cetera. So they're saying there's a lot of increased consciousness.
Yeah. When it comes to healing, for me, it's the more we become aware of where our blocks are to the truth of who we are, that helps us align with the truth of who we are. In my experience, and what I'm teaching right now, where I've landed right now, is that we actually don't need healing. And it's only our belief in the mind that we need healing is what we need to heal. because the truth is we're whole, complete,
Mhm.
and perfect in
Mhm.
all our beingness.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting concept, healing. And I've sat with that word for a long time because I call myself a healer. It feels purposeful. It's been given, it's guided. So that's what I do. But really the truth is that healing is just an idea
Yeah.
on a human level
Mm.
that we need to use because we need to meet people in their humanness in order to remind them of their divinity. And if we don't meet them where they need to be met, then we actually miss out on the opportunity to help them see the truth of who they are.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Oh, yeah, I have a statement I say, how you live is how you heal. It's the consciousness of your moment to moment awareness, and yeah, and dealing with all the things that come up, and observing. It's you observing this interesting dynamic, but anyway.
I always look at it when we actually come to this place of, this is my favorite thing, when you are met with something that normally would trigger you. You would normally have fear or something happen around, you'd have a trigger reaction to, and it's not there. I love those moments because that's the moment when we know we've come full circle in that healing, and then we can show up in our humanness but not be triggered
Exactly
by our leftovers, and that's really empowering.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, Sue, that was fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a good conversation.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon. For more information, go to drmanonbolliger.com.